Good evening, Trump family. Welcome to Open Source News. Have a good night, everyone, and God bless you. Alright, the following is a collection of news from patriots. Let's get into the news. And we've well documented the abuses by the administration, the regime, if you will, over the past couple of years, where they've gone after their political opponents on social media, and other ways, which is unconstitutional. By the way, US government utilizing third parties in order to censor their opponents is against the First Amendment. And they continue to do so. And what was just leaked was Biden to enemy list, who he actively paid $12 million. Our government paid $12 million to a private organization to go after the critics of District Gene. This is enough, obviously, and there's many other things we could remove him from office for, but this is one of the other things that you could remove him from office in, which Republicans should truly focus on between this, the pullout of Afghanistan and troops that were lost, the depletion of our strategic oil supply, the shutting off a Keystone pipeline, and then the list goes on and on. These are all traitor as things that you would do to a country in order to weaken it. And here we have, once again, this regime utilizing social third-party companies, funded by the government to shut down their opponents. This is being brought to us by Becker News. So let's go and dive into it. Again, coming to us from Becker News over here. It says Biden regime paid $12 million to censor political opponents on enemies lists to interfere in elections. And these are the documents that prove this Department of Homeland Security paid $12 million to a private actors to censor President Joe Biden's political opponents and engage in election interference on social media platforms. And I'm gonna stop there just for a moment. Don't forget, the DHS is also the same entity who is trying to put together a misinformation board again to go after their political opponents. They are weaponizing, which we've already done this. They have weaponized these departments to go after American citizens who are critical of its government. The bombshell report was revealed by Robbie Starbuck, who made a bid for U.S. Congress and Tennessee House District 5 before running into opposition for the Republican Party to appear on the GOP primary ballot. And I must stop there for a second one more time over on Twitter. I retweeted this. I said it did not believe it until I saw it. While he was actually right on this. He put it out there. Many times with a lot of these influencers they'll tease something, and it will come out to be another thing. This actually was something, so again, my apologies. I'll be the first one to admit I was wrong on Twitter about this. The thread the DHT coordinated with a group called Election Integrity Partnership to Senator Biden's opponents. He says I'm on the EIP list with Charlie Kirk, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, Donald Trump, Jr., Jack Sobek and more. I was censored while I ran for Congress. Biden's regime paid EIP groups $12 billion government buddy taxpayer money to shut down dissent. Starbuck wrote in a Twitter thread. For all of us. This was a gross violation of our rights, and blatant illegal act by the U.S. government. In my specific case, this was a spate of state-sponsored election interference, and the thread all explain who's evolved and what they did. They crossed lines that can't be uncrossed. This is who makes up the EIP. This is who they are: Stanford Internet Observatory, University of Washington Center for Informal Public, and for Public sees me, Atlantic Council, DFR Lab Analytics Firm. Graphic Ike screenshots below show the grant money each of them received from the Biden administration's departments. Received federal grants from the Biden administration in the next few years. National Science Foundation awarded the Stanford, and WUW projects $3 million in August 2021 to study ways to apply collaborative rapid response research to mitigate online disinformation. Graphite, also known as Octan Data, received his first listing federal grants several weeks after the 2020 election, nearly $3 million for the Department of Defense for unspecific research on cross-platform detection to counter malign influence. Nearly $2 million more followed in the fall of 2021 for research on CO citation network mapping, which tracks sources that cite together. Thank you, Atlantic Council, which hosted DENV Vice President Joe Biden for a keynote address at his 2011 awards dinner, has received $4.7 million in grants since 2021. All but one from the State Department, that far exceeds the think tank's federal haul in previous years, which had an approach $1 million in a single year since 2011. The simplest way to the way the IEP works is to compare it to something you already know. Starbuck went on. You know how the CIA DoD use contractors to fight battles. They don't want to be seen fighting in an official capacity. That's essentially the EIP, but acting as a ministry of truth. How it worked: the DHS, the State Department, and the DNC Common Cause, and the NAACP would file tickets, with the EIP on post, or people they wanted to censor. The EIP did the dirty work of going to big tech. John Solomon breaks it down perfectly in this piece. This is how easy they made it. DHS and the DNC and others just filed a ticket with EIP, who then acted as their messengers to demand big tech take action on the posts or people flagged by the United States government or the DNC. And their report shows big tech delivered for them. The AIP created what was called an enemies list of select groups. They branded as misinformation and needed a need to censorship. I was one of them, and have the distinction of being the only one who is running for Congress while the EIP worked to censor us on behalf of the government. Here's some of the people that were on that list. There's 17 of them. James Woods, the Gateway pundit Donald J. Trump, Jr., Donald Trump, Tom Fitton, Jack Sobek, Kat Turd, Eric Trump, Chuck Stilo, Charlie Kirk, Mark Levin, C.J. Truth, J.M. O'Keefe, Praying Medic, Richard Grenell, a PNG, Japan, PNG, Ben Breitbart, Breitbart News, The Right Melissa, Mike Roman, Robbie, Starbuck, and Sean Hannity. And they have a listing of incidents tickets filed. Right. Some contexts. I announced my run. Some context. I announced my run for Congress in November 2020. The EIP operation lasted through 2021. That means that they worked to censor and malign a congressional candidate on behalf of the U.S. government and Democrat Party. Sadly, they weren't successful. Let me explain the edit. During the course of the EIP communication with big tech, my accounts on Instagram and Twitter were put on a search ban, which remains to this day. And 1000s wrote that Twitter made their accounts unfollow me. This was a clear election interference and an in-kind donation to my opponents. They continue through this article to lay out more of this. But it's clear that the Biden regime was engaged in silencing Americans in this country. Gross violation of their constitutional rights. Our government working against us say it isn't so anyway. This is an important issue that Republicans need to they need to hold this regime to account for all of this misdeeds, crimes it has perpetrated against this nation and its citizens. And next news, Mark Zuckerberg and Meta are in an absolute freefall. Users are leaving revenues down and their stock value keeps falling. Offices are being closed, layoffs abound. And Zuckerberg says wealth is beginning to evaporate. We're gonna see what's behind the collapse of what was once considered the titan among woke big tech giants, and stick them to the very end of this video, when we'll find out why they only have themselves to blame. On Friday of last week, CNBC report on what appeared to be nothing less than an out-of-control death spiral for Meta stock. Men, of course, being the parent company of Facebook, now get this only for stocks, and the S&P 500 were performing worse than Meta. Just a year ago, it was beginning to look like Meta was absolutely insurmountable. They were sporting a market cap of $1 trillion, putting them up at the financial summit of just a handful of us technology giants. But since then, Meta has lost a colossal 2/3 of its value. Its stock is trading at its lowest in years, and it's about to close out its third straight quarter of double-digit percentage losses. Again, only 4 stocks in the whole of the S&P 500 are having a worst year. As it turns out, millions upon millions of users in the United States and Canada have closed their accounts and dumped Facebook. In fact, Gen Z years millennials laugh at it. They barely even acknowledge Facebook's existence. And as a result, advertisers are taking their business elsewhere and Meta's revenue is evaporating. Needless to say, they've begun closing offices. They've just announced that they've terminated their lease for one of their Manhattan offices, and other offices are shrinking as they transition to hybrid work from home. And of course, there are the inevitable layoffs, 1000s of them. Reports are that as much as 15% of Meta workforce will be getting pink slips in the next few weeks. And to top it all off, the cherry on the top, Mark Zuckerberg himself has fallen off the Forbes top 10 list of richest Americans. It is nothing less than a Titanic train wreck of colossal proportion. So what happened here? Why is this once titan among big tech giants imploding? You know the answer? I know you know that. I think every single one of you knows the answer to this. In fact, the answer has a nice little refrain to it. What is it? Who could solve the puzzle? Bring Hannah on here. Get woke, go broke. That's exactly what happened to Meta, and they've left trail after trail of it. When Facebook banned President Trump from its platform almost immediately, Facebook saw $34 billion, that's billion with a B, wiped out of their market valuation. They were financially crushed with that pathetically woke act of cancelled culture. And then, of course, you had the whole saga involving the deliberate censoring of the Hunter Biden laptop bombshell, that, according to the polls, would have sunk Biden in that election. A significant portion of the population said that they would never have voted for him had they known. He was involved in hundreds of illicit business activities, particularly with China. And then, of course, you've got the ridiculously woke culture at Meta. So, for example, last week, Sheryl Sandberg, the CEO of Meta for well over the last decade, she left the company after overseeing a market value loss of 60%. She was an absolute abject disaster by any standard of evaluation. But what's really behind that disaster besides managerial incompetence is her incessant and vile wokeness. You want to take a guess at what she has planned for the next chapter in her life? She's giving $3 million to Planned Parenthood and promises to be a frontlines activist for abortion. That is who was running Facebook. That's the person who is in charge of deciding what you can post and what you can't. No wonder pro-life accounts were getting banned all over the place. And we're seeing, even with Elon Musk take over Twitter, we are seeing the world is moving away from wokeness. They want nothing more to do with it. And it's not even the cancelled culture per se. I mean, that's bad enough, of course, but it's more than that. It's the fact that the proponents of wokeness look so obviously and pathetically petty. You might remember back in September of last year, a number of internal Facebook documents were anonymously leaked to the Wall Street Journal that detailed and described the controversial practices that Facebook executives were knowingly engaging in, such as disregarding their own research and the harms of Instagram, which Facebook owns the harms of Instagram, particularly for young girls, and the false sense of self-image that Instagram promotes. In a further investigation, the New York Times concluded that the major reason why Facebook is so prone to prey on young girls' body image and ignore their own research is not because they're indifferent. It's not because they're so big and powerful. And it's not even because they don't frankly care. It's because they're so desperate. It's because Facebook is in so much trouble. This is from the piece, quote, "Not financial trouble or legal trouble, even senators yelling at Mark Zuckerberg trouble. What I'm talking about is a kind of slow, steady decline that anyone who's ever seen the dying company up close can recognize. It's a cloud of existential dread that hangs over an organization whose best days are behind it, influencing every managerial priority and product decision, and leading to increasingly desperate attempts to find a way out. This kind of decline is not necessarily visible from the outside, but insiders see 100 small, disquieting signs of it every day: user-hostile growth hacks, frenetic pivots, executive paranoia, the gradual attrition of talented colleagues, and then, after talking about comparisons with Godzilla in terms of how big and powerful Facebook was supposed to be. This piece goes on to note, quote, "If these leaked documents proved anything, it's how an Godzilla-like Facebook feels. Internally, the company worries that it's losing power and influence, not gaining it, and its own research shows that many of its products aren't thriving organically. Instead, it's going to increasingly extreme lengths to improve its toxic image, and to stop users from abandoning its apps in favor of more compelling alternatives. In short, Facebook is basically morally killing over having sold its soul to left-wing wokeness. It's imploding under the weight of its own absurdities. It claims to be a social media platform for everyone that centers opinions that offend them. They claim to be for women's rights all at the same time. They're demonstrably exploiting young girls. It does appear that we really are entering into a post-woke, post-cancel culture age, and if there were one thing we're becoming increasingly sure of about that age, it doesn't look like Facebook will be a part of it. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Of course, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and of course possibly subscribe if you're up for it. I'm gonna get back to work. I want to thank you guys for